I think that like the suffering that I went through with the heartache was my purpose to be able to share with these songs.
I really love the record, Gwen. Congratulations on it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a miracle. I didn't expect to actually get to this point, you know. Every record that I've ever made has been a miracle and it has its own little like story, and I love to reflect back and think about like, you know, myself at that time and to try to get to a place after so much has happened in my life. To be able to really put a mirror up and reflect what was going on and get to the actual truth and show people who I am right now. It was a challenge, I'll tell you that, but it's so amazing to share it, and it feels so good and healing and confessional, and I feel honored.
Yeah, 8 years is a long time.
Yeah, it is, but not when your family breaks up and then you're like trying to scoop the pieces back together, and then you turn and then you see love for the first time, and then you're like going through a pandemic, and then you're a mom, and like I mean there's so many things that happen, and I think that as I have been further into life, like you have to prioritize like your children, your family, and it's like it's I always refer it like, okay, like let's say I want to get a pedicure, right? But I just can't find the time because that would be selfish, right? Like for me to go get my nails done, right? And so it felt like that. It was like, how am I going to go to the studio and justify doing an art project at this point in my life? You know, that just seems quite like it's self-indulgent, and was, but I just kept having this like gnawing like thing. And you know, I always think that if you are given a gift from God, like why if you don't use it, that's not right either. So that's how I justified making this album.
Flowers comes up a lot on the record. The record's called Bouquet. There's tracks like Empty Vase, there's Marigolds, there's Purple Irises. Why is flowers resonating so much with you right now? The idea of flowers.
I think it came from, you know, I think that in my healing journey, like when the first miracle that happened for me, you know, when I first like noticed it and recognized it was when I got pregnant with Apollo. And not to go into super detail with what was going on in my life at that point, but it was a pure like miracle. And I think that, you know, I started to really look at life with and see God in nature like a lot. And it there's so many like I don't know, like metaphors to life and nature and like planting seeds. And that's once you plant that seed, like you can water it, you can watch it, you can put, you know, fake light on it, whatever. But you can't force it to grow, right? And I think that there's just so much truth to that, like in our lives. And I started thinking about that a lot. And when I met Blake, on a literal like level, like we were in Oklahoma, like I never experienced nature like that. Like my nature was going to the beach in Huntington Beach, California, you know. And so to be in nature and be just amongst that, and we did start gardening together, which people say if you have a garden you'll have a longer, happier, peaceful life. And it just started becoming something that we did together that brought like, and it gave us so much hope and peace and all these things. So I think that metaphor just stuck with me. And when I wrote Purple Irises, there's a whole backstory, might bore you, but there was a whole backstory of our love and how it's grown, and these irises that we found on the ranch. And so I don't know, it was just something that just kept popping up when I was writing the music.
I want to hear the story. You're not going to bore me. You're Gwen Stefani, for God's sake. Come on.
I didn't know if maybe you already heard it.
Come on.
Well, like
I am but one person. There's millions of Canadians who want to hear the story. Come on.
Okay. Well, we were hunkered down in Oklahoma. We were so blessed. We were on Blake's Ranch, which is this, I mean, it's very rustic at the time. Like we didn't have a house. We just were living in like these little cabins that were, you know, you had to take your laundry. Like it was very like rustic. And we had the kids and we probably had like 13 people that were all like living there for about 100 days in Oklahoma. And we would go around and like explore the land. And there's like just so much like land that's not untouched. Like, and we found this like old homestead that was falling down that looked like kind of like a broken down, maybe someone built it as their house like 100 years ago. I don't know. And all around it were these purple irises, right? And they were these beautiful flowers just, and you knew that someone had to have planted them because they weren't wild, right? Because nothing in Oklahoma looks that pretty that's wild. I mean, it's like it's crazy there. Like there's so much beauty, but it's also has this like hardness to
Yeah.
it, you know. And so we ended up as a project, a family project, we pulled them all out and we transplanted them to where we were living, way far away. And it was like this whole thing where it was like so much like manual labor, and it was hundreds of them, and all the kids were doing it. And then years later, like they survived and they grew and they multiplied and they were so beautiful. And we took something that someone planted 150 years ago and now they were growing like because of us. And I think there was just so much like there's so much weather and so much reason why those flowers shouldn't have like made it. And I just feel like that is so true to like my life story. And so when I wrote that
Hold on.
song,
Tell me how it's true to your life story.
well, I think that like there's been like a lot of, in my personal life, like my parents met when they were 15, right? They fell in love, and this couple, they are just so in love. Like my whole life I watched it, I watched them just love each other. And that was my example. So what did I want? I wanted that. I thought that's what we all were going to get. You know what I mean? And it just seemed like it was always so impossible for me. Don't get me emotional.
No, but I
So
know what
like,
you mean. Sometimes when like, and this is your personal, up to you to talk about, but like sometimes when we have an example laid for us of like endless sweet love, it's a great thing, but it also sets up like an expectation of what life is supposed to be like.
of course, because that's what
Yeah.
you are, when you're a child, you know what I mean? And so I think for me, it was just like always one disappointment after another. And I always kind of, when I was more immature and didn't realize that we all have to suffer and that suffering can be something good can come out of suffering if you actually give that, like that spiritual intention to the suffering. It wasn't until I wrote my first song after discovering I could even write a song. Like you got to remember, like this is a little girl that has dyslexia. Well, you don't cure it, like it's there, and had so much trouble in school. Like didn't understand why I was like I couldn't get it like everyone else, and I was very like a floater. Like I didn't really know. I didn't have goal. I didn't have dreams. Like I just was like existing. And I think about myself back then and when I wrote my first song, how I found like, wow, that's like my identity all of a sudden. Like I had something so heavy and so like important, and I never had that before. So I think that like the suffering that I went through with the heartache was my purpose to be able to share with these songs. And, I think at the end of the day, we all have our gift and we all need to use it. And we all are like, we need each other. We have to confess. And that's why having this new music and being able to share feels so good.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I tell you how I hear that on the record is that the record to me is so joyful and so triumphant and so loving. And then there's a track like Swallow My Tears, which is heartbreaking and
Yeah.
and sad. And I tell you, this was my take on it, and you tell me if I'm onto something. Like you want to talk about like the joy of suffering or the joy of wanting or like using suffering as a way to make our lives richer and better. I think what you are, whether you knew it or not, we're saying on that record is that all of this joy and all of this love that I'm talking about elsewhere on the record, you can't really get there unless you go through really, really tough stuff, and really, really tough stuff that can kind of change you forever. that can kind of mess you up. Am I onto something there?
You're onto something. And I think it's not just, I think that it's something that we should know that like when we're children, but we don't. And it's like we all have to do this. Like we all have to. It's kind of as simple as, no pain, no gain. And like, it's you can always look at it like your spiritual exercise, meaning like your soul exercise, like your inner self, right? Or your outer self, like your just physical exercise. Nobody wants to really go to the gym and do that. And it hurts. And it's like, but afterward, how good does it feel? Like, it feels so good. So I think that that's the way that like life is so much. And I think for me, on this record, yes, I found love for the first time, like in my life. But I didn't know. I didn't know that I wasn't experiencing it until now. Right. And so I think in songs like Swallow My Tears, or, I mean, there's a lot of things in there. Like there's a song like Pretty
Yeah.
reflects like, okay, like I feel love now and I feel pretty now, but I didn't before because I didn't ever experience it. So it's like that was a lot of sadness, you know what I mean, for a long time. So like I think also like a song like Swallow My Tears is like talking about I have all this. I could mess it all up because I'm so messed up from the past that I can't love. You know what I mean? Like how do I get free from this? How do I get healed? How do I not like keep going back and all this baggage just like ruining what I have now? These are things that we all go through, right? And I think that moment when I wrote that song was like, oh my God, I wish I could have just videotaped it and just showed everyone, because I know that I was going through something that everyone goes through. And it was like a spiral of 3 days of crying. And I had thought that I was done. I thought that I was healed. And I was so mad at myself, like that I was feeling the way I felt. And so I think that there's like all of these things that we go through, but you, especially like the single, right? Like Somebody Else's, which in my opinion is a very positive song about a breakup. It's about healing. It's about the fast forward after a breakup, right? It's not like harping on something, and it's not a diss song. It's a joyful song, but it also does reflect the past. And I really didn't want to talk about the past in this record. I felt like it didn't deserve to be talked about. And but you can't really have the light without the dark. So being able to show where the love, how far the love has grown was really important. And thank God that I ended up cutting that song last minute and putting it on the album. It ends up being the first single and the first song on the record. And it helps to be able to see where I came from, you know what I mean, to get to this point. So yeah, it's fun to talk about this stuff.
I'm stuck by that thing you told me earlier that you were that old when you wrote your first song. Like I'm stuck on that. Like I'm stuck on that.
Yeah, I was old when I did everything.
But because that was like no doubt was I had the pre-Tragic Kingdom record. Like I had yeah.
You're weird. Who let you on here?
But I didn't know that like even for the first years in No Doubt you weren't writing writing songs.
No,
so can you tell me the story when you started? When did you? Why did you?
How did it happen? Okay, so my family is like, have you ever seen the Brady Bunch?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a broken family like the Brady Bunch, but it was so like idealistic. Like our family was, I don't know, like my parents they grew up in the 60s. Like they listened to like all the music we listened to was like folk and bluegrass, and like they were just very like my parents were very like artistic and sort of idealistic. I don't know. They were
Bluegrass, man. That's my jam. That's what I came up playing and all that stuff. Yeah, come on, get out of here.
I mean, like my first concert I ever went to was, they took me out of Girl Scouts to go see like Emmylou Harris at the Palomino Club up in LA. Like,
come on.
Yeah. So like that's kind of like, so then I have this older brother, and he's very eccentric, and he's like the leader of like the family. Like everything he does, like we look up to him, you know what I mean? Cause he's super cool. He always wins the art contest. He can draw. He has this energy. And so like I looked up to him. He's like 3 years older, 2.5 years older. And he's the one that played the music. He's the one that wrote the songs. I was just nothing. I was just like like passive, you know, I'd be watching TV, like, no, come in here and sing with me. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even know I could sing. But so all of the early music, he wrote all that music. He wrote all that eccentric, weird songs like The Climb and like weird lyrics, and I would just sing them. And it wasn't until the first song I ever wrote, and I can't understand within like the breakup relationship. It was I think it was before me and Tony broke up. And I don't know how old I was, but I was in my 20s because we started the band when I was 17. I was still in high school. And then because I graduated at 17. And then I ended up, like in my early 20s writing a song called Different People. And that was the first song I ever wrote. And it was like this weird like song about like my sister and just trying to like understand how like everyone's so different but yet we need each other, and it was this kind of unity like song. Like I think in my early 20s and I first started going to college, I really saw like all these different cultures and people from all over the world trying to like, I don't know, find themselves. And I was just so fascinated by culture and differences, but yet how similar we all were. So that song was kind of reflecting that. And then it wasn't until like a lot of tragedy that I really found my gift. And it was when my brother, who was my hero, quit the band, and my boyfriend, who was my obsession, quit me. And all of a sudden, I was like, what am I going to do now? Like things were just getting good. And I still live with my parents. I'm never going to be good at school. I have no idea what's going to happen next. And I just started writing one song after another. And I just remember my dad had like these little cassettes, and he was, I guess, playing for them for people at work. And I was on the phone with him one day, and he's like, I played your songs for, some of these people at work, and they said they're really good. Like, you should just do what you're doing. Like, don't stop doing it. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, I've never gotten a compliment like that before. It was just like, I agree they're good. Like, because for me, they were each one a miracle. Each one of them was like my truth. It was so saturated in my truth that I couldn't stop listening to it. And it wasn't like I did it. It was like it was given to me. You know what I mean? Like I just kept listening and listening and listening, like obsessively. And then I would call Tony and be like, listen to this one. Look what you did to me, And he'd be like, oh, well, that's really good. That's a really good one.
So what is the effect then of when songs that are, well, when you feel like you don't have a voice, when you feel like you're just kind of coasting through life, when you feel like other people are the talented ones, and then you start writing songs, and not only are they like edifying for you and they're like meaningful to you about your pain and they're helping you, your family loves them, you're starting to get more respect from your family, but then those are the songs that take No Doubt into becoming this big global phenomenon. I mean, I don't have to tell you that like Don't Speak and Just a Girl are the songs that, like these songs are. What was that like for you to, I mean, it's a big question, but what was it like for you to watch those songs happen, watch those songs blow up? I mean, I don't think there's an analogy for how big it got with those songs.
Yeah, I think it was the way that God made me, my personality. Like at the time, I was very sheltered and very unaware of what was going on. I don't even think that when we got signed that I really knew what that was. I was just such a naive. I was just like, writing in my notebooks, like, you know, like not paying attention and sort of like, I can't wait to go thrift store shopping. Like, I don't, it's just very like, just a very like passive person. But even when we got on the radio, like it was super exciting. But you have to remember, we had those songs for a long time before that. So we'd been in the band already 9 years. I was 25, 26, still living at my parents' house, which was normal. Like it didn't seem weird. I was, at that point, I think I had stopped. I didn't have a job anymore. I don't think, I can't remember. But I remember I was in college and I was finally doing art history, and I was like, okay, like, doing painting classes, and I was going to paint the cover of the Tragic Kingdom. And then we did this concert, and they were like, people were passing down their notebooks for autographs in class. It was like that. It was so weird. And then we went and did the Just a Girl video, walked to the airplane, and didn't come home for 2.5 years. I mean, it was literally, and you can imagine, I was so unbelievably heartbroken from my breakup. Like, I couldn't see anything else but red. Like, it was just about that for me. And for me to be on tour with him and everything that had gone on, even now makes me choke up, because it was a really hard time for me. Like, because I was so alone. I felt very alone during that time. So it was a really hard time, but being able to share the music, like things like sitting on the bus and looking out of the window and being like, that girl's wearing my outfit. Like, what? Like, oh my gosh, like, she's copying me. But it was like, they were like reflecting me. They were my girls. And it was like, that was bizarre. And then, it was just, the whole thing was just so beautiful, because like the theme of this whole conversation, the suffering that I had been going through was, there was so many good things that were coming out of it, on not just for me, but for so many people. And yeah, it's just an incredible testament to what I believe is God's work, really. So yeah, it was an incredible time in my life. And it doesn't end like with just doing those big records. I mean, the music is the music. So no matter what point I am in my own personal life, like it still does the same thing for me, and it's still that important.
And thanks a lot for doing this. I really love the record. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I love you guys. I love Canada, and thank you for checking out the music always.